Where would you like me to sit?
At
The head of the table? How about let's sit right in the middle of
I'm
it
Kirk
all?
Shepherd. John Critchley. How you doing?
Fine, Billy.
Hi, I'm Chris Horvath.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Carol Anderson.
I bet you
Yes,
outside
you
with the key to
did.
the restaurant.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm Lisa MacDonald.
Hi, Lisa. Oh, do you want me to sit?
What do you want? What do you want? to
Sure.
sit here, probably. So
We have the recorder.
You can hear either, or the preference.
No, as long as it's.
I'm sure it's gonna
picked
pick up.
Yeah.
Picks up in the green room, it can pick up.
Right,
in this room,
exactly.
sure.
Okay. And thank you for coming. We decided to record it. We're still in the confidential investigation stage. And if you look at the code of ethics, it remains confidential unless we make a finding of probable cause. If we make a finding of probable cause, then our record would be public. Okay. So what we'd like to do is place you under oath and ask you to
Tell the truth, the whole
Tell the
truth, and
truth,
nothing
the
but
whole
the truth, so help you God. I put people under oath all the time. Yes, I
Okay.
do.
You do, upon penalty of perjury, or so help you God, you swear to tell the truth.
I do.
All right, thank you. Would you state your name, please?
Lisa MacDonald.
Okay. And I understand you're on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
I am on planning and zoning, yes.
Okay. And you got a copy of the complaint.
I did.
Okay. And I think we blacked out parts, but we're in this room now. Frankly, this is the first time we've had to go through this. So I think you know who the other person is.
Yes.
Okay. And we're here to ask you some questions and see if there's anything that you want to tell us. We did just meet with John Main, and just to kind of get a background of this whole thing, because frankly, although I understand it's been in the paper, none of us really knew the history.
The timeline.
The timeline, and, I mean, bits and pieces of it, but not the whole history. So, we understand now that there was an original application for commercial use, and it was a site plan application.
Correct.
And your husband was, who's your husband and what does he do, I guess?
My husband is Michael MacDonald.
You know,
What do you mean by what does he do? You mean-
what's his relationship to the application that's the subject of
The Watts
this
property.
The Watts property.
Well, the original application, he was hired to consult. He provided consulting services during the application, the pre-application process, talking about the project, the application process, and the meeting, the hearing at planning and zoning.
Okay.
Okay.
What's his profession then? Is he an architect?
He's a licensed architect.
Okay.
He works in business development for a construction company.
Okay.
So, and he does sideline work, consulting type of work.
Okay.
And he was the project manager for the property. How would you?
All I know, I mean, what I wrote in my response,
Yeah.
I actually had to ask my husband to, come here, I have to respond to this. What did you do? Because I need to, dates in particular, but
Right.
I had to say, what function did you serve? Because I didn't really know. I don't, I'm not part of my husband's business.
Mhm.
I don't do what he does any more than I would imagine he would understand, what an attorney does or so.
Okay. Do you have a business? Do you?
No, I'm not currently working.
Okay. So what did he explain as project
Exactly what I
manager?
wrote in my letter, my
Okay.
response.
So, well, you said he was a project manager. So what did
No,
that?
you said he
Somebody
was a
said
project
No, I
manager.
thought I saw that in your.
Yeah, I-
We did too.
I don't.
You saw, you, that's what other people referred to his function.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. I don't think, I'm looking at my response,
Okay.
and, I'm sorry.
It doesn't say that in there.
Yeah, it says, member of my immediate family spouse had an arrangement for paid consulting services with Watts to assist in the design and construction of a building, phase 1 of the Watts application. Okay.
So did he drew the plans for the building that was built?
I believe he drew an initial plan. I think there's one document with his name on it, but then there were architects hired to draw plans, and
He was in a consulting role.
yeah, he was in a consulting role, so he did not, he did not do all the structural drawings. He hired engineers, he hired architects, and then he assisted with the interviewing of subcontractors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know the dates of his employment or his relationship when he provided his services? I understand
Yeah.
it was up until, you're saying November 2010?
Yeah, I don't know when he started working for John, at what point.
Because this is a pretty long drawn-out process, this whole application for the Watts property. But he probably started
it did,
in the beginning.
end up that way.
2009, probably.
Yeah,
Well, if you
I don't know
if you
the
know
answer.
when it was.
No, I do not
That's the
know.
question.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I know because I asked specifically, when was the last time you were paid? When was the last time you issued an invoice, and when was the last time you were paid? And my husband told me it was in November of 2000 and, yeah.
Okay. Who drew the site plan? Did your husband draw that, or somebody else?
I don't know.
Okay. What's the document then that his name is on?
I think he knows. He does. I asked that question myself. I mean,
Okay.
He knows what it is. He said, there's only one document I think that has my name on it.
Okay.
I mean, I tried to get this. I mean, I don't want to jump in.
Sure.
I'm trying
I
to-
don't,
this is
well, my answer was going to be I don't know, so.
I mean, it's not trying to hide anything. It's I think there's one document, based on what Mike told me, that has his name on it. But they actually hired people to do the stuff that, actually went before, as I understand it, actually went before planning and zoning, and, ultimately, initially, I guess, it was turned down. And,
My husband was, when you have an application before planning and zoning, you have the applicant, and often they're with an agent
Right.
or a representative.
Mm-hmm.
And so, John Watts, and again, I wasn't in the room because I recused myself.
Right.
I wasn't part of that process. I'm not even familiar with all of the application. And so, but my husband went that night with John to the hearing. That much I know because I know what he was going to be.
Okay.
that was the first hearing.
That was the first hearing. Yeah, because he wasn't involved in the second one.
Yeah, I'm just saying it for the record.
Right. Okay. So, you recused yourself right off the bat because you knew he was involved in that first application.
Well, I recused myself the first time because the statute says financial interest,
Right.
direct or indirect, member of your immediate family.
Right.
And at that time, my husband was being paid for these services.
Okay.
So it was a clear-cut, no-brainer.
Okay.
That was November 30th in 2009. We have the minutes.
Yeah.
I don't recall the date, but
And you and Cynthia Watts recused yourself from
I-
the discussion.
she recused herself as well, yes, so
Right.
whatever.
Is that the date of the hearing? Is that the date?
Yes.
First time
Yeah.
around.
And,
Can you repeat that for me, please?
November 30th, 2009, both you and Cynthia
Okay.
We don't have-
recused yourself from the agenda item of the Watts property.
Mhm.
Were you asked to recuse yourself at that point?
No,
Okay.
And that's when Michael, your husband, gave a presentation.
correct. No, I mean, there was no
We just
Doubt.
learned a little bit about the procedure. So I guess
There
there's
was no
it happens
doubt.
at the very beginning.
Mhm.
It can't happen in the middle. It's sort of the onus is on the commission members themselves to know that it's inappropriate. we had asked whether it was just part of the procedure to roll through these things and ask these questions, so you took it upon yourself to.
I mean, I routinely have disclosed whenever an applicant is before the commission that I have a relationship with or I know or whatever. For instance, by way of example, most recently, a gentleman came who was doing a CAM, coastal area management, and he happened to be doing seawalls, and those seawalls happened to be located right next to my property. Boom, 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 the three adjacent. We were separated only by a right-of-way. I disclosed the fact that my property was right next to those, that I had no financial interest, no personal or pecuniary interest whatsoever in this gentleman's application, but that I wanted everyone to be aware, and that was that.
Just your fellow board members? Was this a public hearing?
It was a public hearing, and before the gentleman spoke, I just commented that the application was for property next to me. So.
Well, they're not talking about that one. Let's stick to the facts of
Well,
this.
but I'm just saying that I
The
routinely, you were asking about the procedure, and that I
Yeah.
routinely,
We'll be here all
But
night.
anyway, you're
though,
right.
if we can answer these questions.
Okay,
I know
I'm
they
sorry.
want to be here all night.
Yeah.
And I want to go back
No,
up to West
I
Hartford.
know, he's got a long drive, and possible
No,
snow,
no.
so,
Not possible.
yes, no.
And you also recused yourself on December 14th. That was basically about a traffic study for the Watts property. You recused yourself.
That's 2009.
2009, yeah. December 14th, 2009.
Because, to be honest with you, I didn't know my husband was done. Like I said, I had to ask him, when were you last paid? So, yes.
Well, that was all
But
you
that
did.
was also, right there.
Okay. When someone is recuses themselves, have you ever seen them, an alternate then get seated?
No, that's not how the procedure works.
Okay.
What happens when you do? I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry. What happens when you do recuse yourself? Do you remove yourself from the room, or you leave the room entirely?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, when that matter is done, you come back. And that's why no one else is seated for you.
Okay.
Because you only have an alternate seated for a member when the member is not there. Okay? If they leave the meeting for good, if they don't show up at all, an alternate will be seated. If, say they can only stay for half the meeting, they leave, they've got someone, then somebody will be seated. But not when a person is recused.
Okay.
And not in my, I don't know how many years I've been on board, but not in my experience is that.
Is there
And I did question the staff on that because I saw that was being made an issue, and staff said no, we do not seat anybody when a board member recuses themselves.
Okay. Because that was confusing to us. We saw people get appointed right after this particular vote of November 14th, 2011. But that was because Mr. Rossi left.
Correct.
Okay.
Are you talking about this
Yeah, this
meeting
November
that just
14th.
occurred? Yeah, he was
Right.
ill and he left the meeting halfway through. Correct.
He left after the vote,
Right.
and then somebody else was seated.
Correct. Because he left the building.
Okay. I know your husband's here, though, in the waiting room. Would he be able to answer any questions, or would he be willing to answer any of the questions that we have?
Yeah, when we're done with Lisa, we could do that, sure.
Okay.
I mean, to give an idea as to what his role was to some degree,
Right,
but
right, okay.
But as far as you know, his relationship with John Watts is finished. I mean, it's just completed. His work is completed. He's been paid. He's not on any kind of consulting fee or receiving any more monies.
That's what I said in my letter.
I know, I'm just asking.
he's just asking.
And-
He's just
and-
asking.
You can be, please be patient. We're just.
And he was paid his last fee in November. And he, to my knowledge, has no other relationship with him.
Okay.
or I would not have.
You can-
If there was still a payment in process, I would not have
We have to.
participated.
we have to-
You can just appreciate her sense of frustration.
I understand.
I mean, I'm down here and
Yeah.
it looks
It's costing me money.
pretty clear on these facts. And I've actually been in this role before. You don't see too many of these things. I know.
No. This
I was
is
on
first
one for
us.
3 years and we never did any,
Yeah.
happily.
Yeah. The litigation that led to, you state in your response that on July 11th, 2011, you were in executive session and you asked
Attorney Royston.
Attorney Royston, why did you ask him at that point?
Well, I did several things. First of all, I looked at the statute, and that seemed pretty clear on its face. But as you are, I'm sure, aware, there was a letter to the editor campaign in the paper every single week about this project. And at the point where my name was showing up in that article, first of all, I went back to the statute to make sure. Second of all, I sought the counsel of the former chairman of Planning and Zoning and the current chairman of Planning and Zoning, both of whom felt that there was absolutely no conflict because there was no financial interest and that I could participate going forward. However, and then on several occasions, I disclosed that in meetings, that I intended to participate because there was no financial interest. And the paper, the letter writing campaign continued. And to the point where, I did in one meeting, August 8th, I was chairing that meeting in Mr.
Of 2011.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
August
I was
8th,
trying to-
2011. It was a regular monthly meeting. I was chairing that meeting in Mr. John Main's absence because I'm vice chair of Planning and Zoning, and so I step up, when he's out. And I used the chairman's comments as an opportunity to state once again on the record the reason that I was participating and the reason I did not need to recuse myself. But the bashing and the campaign continued. So in that executive session, our attorney, Dave Royston, was there, and I wanted to ask him the question so all of the board members could hear the answer. Wasn't really sure, I thought, I guess I was pretty sure what the answer was going to be, but I wanted, counsel to tell me. Counsel told me. He agreed with me.
Actually, the chronology is, she was told in executive session, and it's actually on the record on August 8th.
Correct.
It's just that order, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, thank you. But
you
there were
get the
also,
question.
Right.
Okay. So that's what was confusing to us was there's no July 11th, and then 10 days later on July 21st, Mr. Watts resubmitted the site plan application. Was that communicated to Mr. Watts in any way?
Was what communicated to Mr.
That
Watts?
you did not need to recuse yourself?
Not to my knowledge.
What else? Well, we were told by Mr. Main.
Are you questioning that because of the timing of his application
Yeah.
versus my statements?
Right.
Well, you'll have to do, because I don't have that in front of me, nor do I know, but you will have to look and see that there were discussions, mediation discussions about his application, that's my understanding.
Right.
And so they were getting to a point where he was going to be reapplying. And so
Right.
that was in the works, but I don't think that anything had, one had anything to do with that.
Well, that's, just to tell you, that's, I think, what Mr. Main told us that you were discussing settlement litigation, and it was in the context of that, bringing that, or discussing a resolution of that litigation, that you brought that up in
that I brought up.
whether or not you should be disqualified under the statute.
With respect to any matter involving the Watts property.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
Okay. Did you ever look at anything other than the statute, like the code of ethics that we are here talking about?
I think that's what she's referring
That's
to.
what, when I
as
said the
statute.
statutes, I'm referring to.
She's calling about that. This is the conflict of interest that the complaint was on, is what she.
Oh, okay, when you said the statute, I thought you meant that 8-11 statute.
No, I'm,
Connecticut
No.
General
no, 51-4, A, B,
Oh, okay.
and C.
Okay.
The
I'm
actual
sorry.
conflict of interest provision. She's
Right.
been using that interchangeably.
Oh, okay.
That's the
I-
local, sorry.
Well,
Yeah.
because we saw the reference to the statute in the meeting when people were saying you should disqualify or recuse yourself, and that Cindy Watts should too, and so that's why I thought you were.
Nope,
And so the opinion from Mr. Royston was not on the statute, it was on the code of ethics?
no. The opinion of Mr. Royston was exactly what I write in my response. I asked him the question.
Right. And I was just asking you, because I thought you asked him the question of whether or not the statute required you to disqualify yourself. 8-11, disqualification of members of zoning authorities.
No, I asked him if the reason for my initial recusal no longer exists, namely that my husband does not have a financial, no longer has a financial interest in this application, this applicant, whatever. Do I still need to, do I still need to recuse myself, forever? And he said no.
Okay.
She's been using throughout this discussion the word statute, and I can tell you, since I've talked to her, we've never even talked about that statute. This has always been about the complaint that is
Right.
before you folks.
Okay.
So that's the only,
The
If there is-
statute specifically referenced, though, in the hearing, somebody referenced that statute, not the
Fritz.
Fritz, I guess,
Fritz read
not the
that.
code of ethics or anything, it was just a statute. This was approved as a 2-phase project, is that correct? Somebody told us that. I think
I
it's
don't
in
know.
yours too.
I-
It is in yours.
Yeah, because I believe it was designed as a 2-phase project, and my husband was involved in phase 1.
Okay. Is it possible that he could be involved in phase 2?
No,
And why not?
there's no way in hell.
Well,
he's not involved in it. I mean,
Yeah, he's not
well,
involved in
it hasn't been started or anything, so why not? Because of the controversy?
I mean, well, he hasn't been asked to, but he hasn't been retained to. I mean,
He hasn't been asked, he hasn't been retained, and so.
at the time that she voted on this, he wasn't retained to do that other piece of it. I can see what you're asking.
Right.
A fair question. He wasn't retained to, he hasn't been involved in any piece of this at all since that date.
His involvement in phase 1 ended. I mean, obviously, he issued his last invoice and was paid in November, and so that was an ending. But if you want a date, certain, his service on phase 1 ended when the CO was issued by the town,
Okay. Do you know when that was?
February.
It's in here,
It's
February
in my-
2011, that was on.
Okay.
It's
It's
in
in
my-
where?
It's in the
It's
letter.
in my
that-
response.
I don't know the exact date, but that's what the
Okay.
response is.
I'm not sure what the exact date is either, but it was in the month of February 2011.
Okay. So his last payment was in November of 2010, but his involvement continued?
No, it's
until the
just that
certificate-
Letter, let me ask the question.
Until the certificate was issued. I'm just trying to understand what you said.
right, and the answer is no. That's not the case. All I'm saying is my understanding, very minimal understanding of what my husband does, is that once a CO is issued, the project is done. So
That's a drop dead date.
that's what
Right.
yeah.
He was already paid for everything, but,
There might be more.
you never know. I mean, this is a year ago, but clearly everything was, that's like a stamped date.
Yep.
Not relied upon by the parties, but there's some actual date. That's the
That's
language they talk
industry standard.
about. Yeah, that's what
Had you worked for Mr. Watts before? Did any work for him before?
No.
And the potential for him doing work in the future is not there at all for this project?
My husband does this type of work as a sideline business when he has time to do it. And he picks his projects carefully because, again, he has a full-time job and he does this on a limited basis on the side, usually residential work. So I would have to say that the answer to that is unlikely, given his schedule.
You can ask him.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you can ask him that question.
Right,
I don't
yeah.
think it has anything to do with anything in the complaint at that time, but you can ask him.
Right.
You had a pretty lively meeting in November when this all was discussed, and I think that's putting it mildly. Mr. Main had asked if anybody needed to recuse themselves.
No, I don't recall that.
You don't.
It's
I
in the
recall.
minutes, I think.
I recall. Well, this is my. I don't recall that. I recall that Pam Fritz and Anna Samuel Dalia requested that certain people recuse themselves, and then I believe Ms. Watts asked Pam Fritz to recuse herself, and then Mr. Main went about the vote in accordance with instructions from Dave Leaston. And the question I understand is not should anyone recuse themselves, but is anyone's vote influenced by the fact that Cynthia Watts, Lisa MacDonald, and Pam Fritz are participating? I mean, that's how I recall it and remember.
It just says, and I'm not here to trip you up about this, I just.
Well, it's just my recollection.
It's
And-
in
Let
the
them talk.
November 14th meeting minutes on page 6. Main inquired if there were any members of the commission who may have a direct or indirect interest in this matter in a personal or financial sense, and if so, to please identify themselves for the record, so that he may conduct the proceedings with or without their participation, according to the fact that they may or may not decide to recuse themselves.
Okay.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, but of course I didn't believe that I had a financial interest and needed to recuse myself.
He didn't.
I didn't. Right.
Did you have a personal interest in just seeing that the project was completed?
No. My only interest was as a planning and zoning commissioner was to apply, the regulations to the application and to represent, the town in a planning and zoning matter, which is what I.
So you really felt that you were acting in the best interest of the town
And in accordance with the regulations.
in accordance with the regulations and doing what you should be doing as a member of P&Z.
Correct.
So the other members of the commission that weren't seated, and I know that you can't recuse yourself and then have somebody step in, but I'm not just asking, they're not seated and they can't vote, but is there any reason, would you think they wouldn't act in accordance with regulations and possibly deny the application? I mean, you see what I'm saying? If you were to recuse yourself and they had stepped in, is there a reason to believe that they wouldn't follow regulations the way that you would,
mean
or
one of the alternates who would have been
yeah,
seated
yeah, any
instead
one
of me?
them. Yeah, there's 3 alternates there.
Well, they would not have been seated if I recused myself. So that
Okay.
Is
If you recused yourself like the first time, you recused yourself and you left, they could sit in.
No, I don't. No, I did not leave. I
No,
left
but
the
if you
room.
had, like-
No. I let you. You have. This is a fine point. When you recuse yourself, you leave the room. You don't leave the meeting. You come back when that particular matter is finished. So you have. You're still
Yeah.
seated. You're just recused.
Okay.
For that issue.
Okay, that's right, you did, yeah, that's right, okay, so Cindy Watts was the one that was absent the first meeting, and okay, I'm getting this all confused.
There's just no, I mean, I can't, I've been to a few heated discussions, not where people have been challenged, you know, to their validity on the board. Was it just some point where you said, you know, it's, people are paying attention, people are upset that I'm here, I'll just, this could balloon into something big if I stay, I'll just recuse myself and eliminate it as a possibility?
No,
Why not? I guess.
because I was looking at these provisions and felt that there was no financial interest, and I had gotten that opinion from our council, and I was elected to do a job. I wasn't elected to run and hide every time a controversial issue came up. And if that were to happen, you're never going to have anybody who's willing to seat on, be elected to these boards and participate. If every time, somebody doesn't like the outcome, they can, bash them around like a piñata. So, no, I was elected to do a job, and it's sometimes a difficult job. I know, I don't like having my name in the paper, but I'm also there to do a job, applying the regulations to an application, and I'm not there to be pushed around by politics. All right?
Did it become about that, do you think?
It's always been about that.
No,
What do you
that you
mean?
felt bashed and that
This-
you weren't gonna cave or say, even for the chance that the best way to go would have been to recuse yourself? It's more about, it wasn't not more about.
No, you can't put words in my mouth like that.
No, I'm not putting them in.
No.
I just want to make sure
No.
they're not.
No.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anybody else?
No?
Okay.
Can I just make a couple
Sure.
brief comments? And the only thing, and it's more of a summary on this. This, which has been referred to as a statute, but it's really part of the town conflict of interest rules. They clearly set forth about the financial pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, and it talks about the time frame in question. Clearly, that's what the complaint's on. The board, I can thankfully say, I never had to participate in extensive hearings when I was on there. They just didn't file the complaints, but if there's a complaint filed, your job is to look at those, which is why I was telling Lisa to be patient, because I know you just soon not be here either. But the issue that you raise about complaints in politics, it's interesting. I was thinking about this a little bit before coming down. It's an article in the Hartford Current. Schools chief has no conflict. And it talks about the state commissioner of education. There was a claim he had a conflict of interest about charter schools because his own background as a co-founder and manager of charter schools. And the Current comes out and says, no, because he was in the business, he was a founder, he did the charter schools, but at the time he's not running charter schools. There's an article about a judge who just died, who named Judge Satter, who I'm sure you're familiar, 92 years old, and he was still working up until his death. He came in with oxygen, and he was very meticulous about conflicts of interest. And he started a trial. As a trial lawyer, I can appreciate this. He started a trial. They'd started the evidence, and he realized that the company that he owned. No, it doesn't seem to be the case. I asked that question.
No.
Yeah.
Because two of the letter campaign writers, the two primary people, one's a Republican, one's Democrat, so no, I would have to say no.
Okay.
And the second, you said there were two.
The other is more personal, and that is that the applicant it's the applicant's practice, part of his practice is to foreclose on, I believe, tax liens, and he did so against someone.
Political against.
And that person
Yeah.
is one of the letter writers, so,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
I believe that anybody involved in this project is going to have to deal with a certain amount of harassment.
Okay.
I think after all this is over, I'm the pastor across the street at the
That's nice to meet you.
church. Nice to meet you, Lisa. I think I'll just go over and do a blessing on the property or something. Exercise all of the spirits. Or
Keep going to the old Hungry Lion building. That building's
Well, that's
cursed.
what he did,
The
yeah.
Hungry Lion, I know what that is.
That needs a blessing.
Boy, oh boy,
It's a
you've really
blessing.
been through it on this thing, just on this issue, holy cow.
Well, and you know, to that end, if I have appeared to be a little bit frustrated, I am.
It's okay. I understand. I understand. I just didn't want you to
I appreciate it.
do something that would hurt you.
No,
So
I appreciate that.
I understand completely.
I usually,
Yeah.
try to do the right thing. Always have.
Okay. That's what we need to hear. Appreciate it.
So,
Okay.
that it?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank
Do
you
you
very
want? Can we ask your husband to come in and?
Yeah, can I just talk to him and tell him you can ask him a couple
Sure.
questions?
Just-
You want to ask him about what his role was and whether he's getting,
Right.
whether he's
Right.
still involved and whether he was after that?
Yeah.
Basically, that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Am I to leave the room?
You can leave.